in different parts of the world actually had already been identified, but they had just been named something different. So the idea of binomial nomenclature, which includes the genus and the species, binomial means two names. Genus is always capitalized and species is always lowercase. You cannot, discovering an organism, you actually cannot by law name it after yourself. You can name it after someone, but not after yourself. So take a moment now to actually check out the Google Doc that's in Google Classroom. And there's a little link there to a video on Carl Linnaeus. So if you want to watch that when this video is done, you can make some notes on that. Now, in looking at the different species of bears on that same page 64, you see that there are 5 different bears on that page. And we refer to all of these commonly as bears in the English language. Black bears because they're black, grizzly bears, okay, have a rounder, bigger face. They're like a grayish brown. Brown bears are brown. Polar bears, because they live in polar regions, and panda bears. Now, if you want to look at which of these is more closely related or which one of these is not as closely related, you have to go back to their scientific names. So if you look up the actual scientific names of each of these bears, you will see that there is one bear that does not share the same genus as the rest of these bears. In fact, it's not even a true bear. All right? And what's interesting, if you take the time to actually look up the different scientific names for each of these bears, you'll see that some of them are named because of the geographic area in which they actually, live. And some of them are named because of behavioral traits. Okay, you take Ursus horribilis versus Ursus arctos or Ursus maritimus. Okay, maritimus because it spends most of its time in the water. Arctos because it lives up north. Horribilis because the person who probably documented it was terrified out of his or her skin. And I'm going to say his because it was probably a guy. So when we look at the actual scientific name of something, all right, it generally will be the genus of the organism, and it's the species that is more of the descriptor. Okay, next we're going to talk about the actual variation within organisms or among organisms. And we know that there's a really big variety of organisms on this planet. But if you adhere to the idea or the concept of evolution, you understand that the idea here is that we've all evolved from more or less a common ancestor. And that ancestor is believed to be a single-celled organism, okay, a unicellular organism that over the years, and we're talking many years, we're talking billions of years, because some of the oldest bacteria or unicellular organisms on the planet date back to about 2 billion years, something called the Precambrian time in the geological time scale. Now, how do we go from still having bacteria or still having these single-sexed organisms, or celled organisms, I should say? We also have single-sexed organisms on the planet. But how do we go from something like that to something like us that has about 37 to 50 trillion cells? All right, and that happens through the concept of mutations in DNA. And DNA is something that all living organisms that we found on this planet to date share in common. Okay, whether you're the simplest monaran or bacterial cell, okay, and have DNA, to the most complex organisms that we've found, so mammals seem to be the most complex organisms right now, they all have DNA. And in every one of the cells in our body, we have the exact same DNA. And that DNA is a code. Okay, that code is actually broken down into 46 different segments or chromosomes. Now, chromosomal number is a characteristic property. Humans have 46 chromosomes. Fruit flies have 8. Okay, humans can still survive with 45 or with 47 chromosomes, but it usually leads to abnormalities. Case in point, something like Down syndrome. Okay, Down syndrome has different physical and cognitive or brain abnormalities. And that is because there's an extra chromosome at the 21st pair. We have 23 pair. 23 times 2 is 46. And it's almost like the idea of Goldilocks, where too much DNA is not good, not enough DNA is not good. For the species, it has to be just right. And we know that adaptations in organisms actually come from mutations in DNA. They come from small little typos as we're repeating and repeating and recopying these DNA sequences, because that's what our body does. Our cells are really, really good at recopying DNA, and we need to recopy it on a daily basis, okay, for a variety of things that we will learn about later. But here's the deal. Just like when you and I type things out, we make little typos. And Word or Pages or Google Docs is capable of auto-correcting different words. If you're texting somebody and you're using autocorrect, it will actually change words that you've typed for something it thinks it should be. Okay, our cells and our DNA have that same mechanism, that proofreading mechanism that picks up 99.9 infinity of the typos. But every once in a while, the code is not transcribed or copied down correctly, and that leads to mutations in the DNA. And the mutations can actually be good or they can be bad. And if a mutation is good, it's going to lead to an adaptation. And as we know, adaptations, okay, will allow specific organisms to outcompete other organisms within that species. So generally, that mutation is passed down from offspring to offspring. Okay? And that's what allows for physical changes in organisms. Now, we also know that mutations can actually be bad. And usually when a mutation is bad, it will lead to the death of the organism, which means that that mistake or that typo dies out. So we're going to end this here. I'd ask that you actually go back and watch the Linnaeus video. And then I'd like you to check into your Google Classroom. There's several of you that have not actually signed on to Google Classroom yet. And you can do that. If you have not done so, you can, in your email, in your Traff email, you will see that there are 9 little boxes like this, and it's much straighter and proportioned. In the uppermost, if I look at my email, it's in the top right side of my actual screen. Along the same sort of parallel to Trafalgar School for Girls and the search menu for your email. If you click on that box, all right, or that set of little squares, it will actually bring you to all of the different things that Google does. And if you scroll down, you will see Classroom. All right. And if you go to Classroom, if you have not accepted my invite yet, if you have, my Classroom should appear. If you have not set up my Classroom yet, if you click on that, my suggestion is to include the actual code here. classroom code is going to be emailed to you in the Google Doc, and I'd like you to actually look at the activity on the Google Doc and carry out that activity to the best of your ability. Okay, you're going to look at the different classification of different organisms and specifically insects. All right, we're going to look at the differentiation between different orders within, the class Insecta, and the different families within those orders.